Welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping into a really focused stack of sources today. It's a series of connected reflections, and they're all centered on the velocity of knowledge in modern teams.
Right. And the core idea here is pretty simple when you boil it down. That insight, that feedback, it has to move faster than all the paperwork that governs our projects.
That speed, that velocity of knowledge, as you put it, is really the heart of the AI Agile Manifesto's second value, right?
Exactly. It's delivering intelligent outcomes over producing exhaustive documentation.
Okay, let's unpack that right away, because this value, I think, it hits on a really structural problem that, well, nearly every organization using Agile today is facing. We are so often just drowning in documents, detailed reports, dashboards, status updates. And yet, as these sources point out, teams are learning very little when that learning actually matters.
Yeah. We have the volume, but we absolutely lack the timely insight.
And that lack of insight is, well, it's a direct result of what the sources call the scheduling trap.
Yes, the scheduling trap. In traditional Scrum, or really any process-heavy system, we treat learning like an event. Something you put on the calendar.
Like, we'll get to that in the retro, or we'll analyze the data after we show.
Exactly. And by the time that meeting rolls around, the sprint is over. The decisions are locked in.
The damage is done.
The damage is done, and the cost has already been paid. The real problem isn't a shortage of documents. It's a shortage of timely, actionable intelligence.
It's kind of an ironic failure, isn't it? The whole point of original Agile was to learn through working software, to adapt quickly.
For sure. But over time, the process itself, this need to prove we were doing Agile, led to documentation kind of replacing intelligence. And, well, the rate of learning just slowed right back down.
So that structural reality, that brings us to the first big learning barrier that the sources identify. And this one, it starts with something a lot of teams hold as almost sacred.
Oh, yeah. The retrospective.
The retrospective. The sources call this the retrospective trap.
Right. And the argument isn't that reflection is bad. Of course it's not.
Yeah.
But it's about timing. Learning that only arrives at the end of a sprint. It often arrives too late to change the outcome you just produced.
So you get these perfect insights, but only after the work cycle is finished. It's just hindsight wisdom.
It is. It's hindsight. You can do a perfect root cause analysis, but that analysis can't go back in time and fix the execution that just happened. It can only, hopefully inform the next cycle.
And that gap between the insight and the action, that's incredibly costly.
It's so costly. If a team only reflects after the fact, they're acting historically. They're just archiving the past. And psychologically, if I made a bad call on a Monday and we don't even talk about it until Friday afternoon.
It's ancient history by then.
It's ancient history. The context is gone.
Yeah.
It's so much harder to connect the dots and get a real immediate change in behavior.
Okay, so building on that timing issue, the second insight kind of zooms in on what the sources call the momentum killer.
The problem of feedback delays.
Right. Waiting for formal reviews, for approvals, or for that dashboard that only updates once a week. What does that do to the flow of work?
It just kills momentum. Because again, the learning becomes historical instead of immediate and helpful. We see this all the time. If you're a developer and you get feedback on a complex component 3 weeks after you coded it, your brain has moved on. You got 3 other things you're working on.
So you're treating that feedback as like a cleanup task. It's maintenance on an old problem, not a real-time course correction.
Exactly. Fast feedback changes behavior now, while the context is still fresh in your working memory. The sources really push for feedback to be a continuous stream, not a scheduled gate you have to pass through.
And that real-time connection, that leads directly into the third big point, which is about prevention versus explanation.
This one really gets at the limits of learning after delivery.
So if you wait until the product is shipped to learn whether it met the need, you can definitely explain why it failed.
Oh yeah, you could root cause it perfectly. But you rarely prevent that same kind of failure from happening somewhere else in the organization.
So the focus has to shift.
The focus shifts entirely to prevention. AI Agile is all about pushing that learning directly into the flow of work. And when that happens, you see a measurable, sometimes dramatic drop in rework.
Because teams feel empowered to adjust during execution?
Yes. They make the small correction when the cost is tiny. They fix the misstep when it's just a few hours of work, not a massive overhaul 3 weeks down the line.
That makes perfect sense for a single team. But what happens when you zoom out? What about the whole organization? And that brings us to the fourth insight, which is about the organizational drag.
or why learning just consistently fails to scale. This is, I think, one of the biggest silent killers of agility in large companies.
So learning gets trapped.
It gets trapped inside individual teams. The way we share it is, manual. Someone writes a wiki page, or we schedule a cross-team meeting.
Right, the wiki update that no one reads, or that mandatory lessons learned meeting that everyone secretly dreads.
Precisely. So Team A finds a critical deployment issue, they document it, and then 3 months later, Team B hits the exact same wall because that insight never traveled.
That lag time is the drag.
That's the drag. And it forces the entire organization to just repeat the same mistakes over and over. It's a massive waste of resources. And honestly, this is where the AI element becomes not just useful, but really necessary.
Okay, that's a perfect pivot. Because the fifth insight is maybe the most critical one. It's called intelligence over metrics. And the sources position AI not as, a replacement for people, but as a genuine sense-making partner. Why can't we just look at the metrics ourselves? We have so many.
Because we are data-rich, but insight-poor. It's a critical distinction. Most teams collect hundreds of metrics: cycle time, lead time, code complexity, you name it. But under pressure, a human team just cannot realistically correlate 40 different data points across 10 different teams to spot a subtle pattern that's about to cause a huge problem.
Oh.
The sheer volume of data, it just swamps our ability to find the meaning.
So the AI acts as a guide. It connects dots a human might miss. Can you give us a concrete example?
Okay, let's say a team sees their cycle time is ticking up. A human might just say, oh, the work is getting more complex.
Right. Seems logical.
But the AI, as a sense-making partner, it looks deeper. It correlates that rising cycle time with a very specific pattern. It might see that code reviews for components written by new hires in the last 6 sprints were all signed to the same 2 senior developers.
Okay.
And those same 2 developers also had the highest meeting load this week.
So it's not just the code is complex. It's your workflow is creating a bottleneck around these 2 specific people?
Exactly. It spots the friction point before it leads to a delay. It highlights the deviation and gives you that insight before the senior dev burns out or the deadline gets missed.
Yeah.
You just cannot get that from a static report. It transforms raw data into a prediction.
And that leads to the final insight, the 6th one, which connects all of this continuous learning to a much bigger organizational trait. Awareness builds resilience.
Right. This is the long-term strategic benefit. It's not just about speed.
It's about stability.
It's about stability. Teams that learn continuously are just fundamentally more resilient because they're always adjusting their understanding of reality. When that timely awareness prepares them before the stress hits.
They don't panic.
They don't panic. They adapt calmly because they saw it coming. They had foreknowledge thanks to that timely insight.
So if we step back and look at all 6 of these points, from the failure of the scheduled retro all the way to this idea of continuous resilience, there's a really fundamental pattern here.
A clear distinction between documentation and intelligence.
Right. Documentation captures the past. It's archival.
It's historical. But intelligence, that guides the present and it predicts the future. So the shift for AI Agile is, well, it's profound. We're moving the goal away from just recording work to actually understanding the work in real time.
But I can hear a listener, who's been burned by reckless speed before, feeling a little skeptical. If we prioritize intelligence over documentation, aren't we just risking a return to move fast and break things?
That is a critical question, and the answer is no. This approach isn't advocating for zero documentation. It's advocating for intelligent documentation. You should still record why a key decision was made.
But the focus changes.
The focus shifts to making sure the decisions themselves are based on the sharpest, earliest signals available. The goal is to make the work so efficient and the insights so immediate that the need for that exhaustive, retroactive documentation it diminishes dramatically. You need earlier signals, not more reports.
Okay, so let's make this practical. For the listener who wants to actually implement this, who wants to stop the documentation flood, the sources lay out 4 pretty clear steps.
The first one is a cultural shift. It starts with leadership. You have to treat learning as a continuous flow, not a meeting.
So change the questions you ask.
Completely. Instead of asking, what did you finish last sprint? You need to be asking, what friction are you noticing today? Or what patterns are emerging right now? You're moving from auditing performance to facilitating awareness.
And that leads right into step 2. Use intelligence to surface patterns and deviations early.
You have to actually use the tools. You can't wait for a human to manually try to connect all the dots. You automate the pattern recognition and you focus it on the leading indicators of stress or delay.
Which then lets you do step 3, adjust while the work is still in motion.
This is all about empowerment, giving teams permission to make small corrections immediately. So if the AI detects weird latency in one part of the deployment pipeline, that team should be able to pause right then and there to figure it out.
Instead of waiting for the next planning meeting?
Right. That small midstream correction is cheap. The one you make 3 weeks later is expensive.
And finally, to solve that organizational drag problem, the 4th step is to share insights automatically across teams.
This is how you scale learning without scaling the burden. If the system spots a friction pattern in Team A, that insight, not a 10-page document, but the actual insight, needs to travel instantly to Teams B, C, and D.
So you're not forcing someone to write a report that no one will read.
No. The contextualized insight, the pattern itself, just propagates through the organization's intelligence layer. That is, delivering intelligence at scale.
So this whole deep dive really gives us a powerful takeaway. Documents don't deliver outcomes. Sharp, timely decisions do.
Absolutely. And to make better decisions consistently, you have to prioritize intelligence, timing, and awareness over just, keeping exhaustive records.
The goal is to move from being busy and compliant to being genuinely smart and adaptive.
It is. And for anyone in a coaching or leadership role, the shift here is profound. You're no longer just facilitating meetings. You're not just a process cop.
You're enabling insight.
You're actively enabling continuous, immediate insight across your entire operation. Learning stops being something you write about, and it becomes something your team lives every single hour.
So as you go on with your day, maybe take a moment to reflect on this. Consider where learning arrives too late in your own process. Is it in your quality checks, your planning, the big architectural decisions you've already locked in?
And, maybe more importantly, think about the scalability of that learning. If you spot one crucial insight today, how many other teams in your organization could benefit from it, like right now?
Reflect on the idea that just one timely, automatically shared insight could potentially help 6 other teams learn faster and avoid making that same costly mistake next week.
That's the power of this shift.
Thank you for engaging with the source material today. We look forward to continuing this exploration of how